You may all know that Pearl Harbor was attacked by Japanese warplanes in a surprise attack on December 7, 1941. But what you may not be aware of is why. The Japanese were justified in the attack as a result of the Treaty of Versailles. As we learned in Chapter 13, the Versailles Treaty gave Japan less than they wanted. The United States had also placed an embargo on Japan since they invaded Indochina on July of 1941. So basically, bombing Pearl Harbor was just getting revenge for the way the United States treated Japan. All in all, the United States was attacked by Pearl Harbor by Japan as a result of the way they treated them, which led to the United States entrance to the World War II, which led to the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Their objectives or motives. Number one, the goal for the Japanese plan was to destroy the Pacific Fleet. If they were successful, this action would jeopardize America's chances of fighting back as Japan's armed forces spread across the South Pacific. In other words, it intended to protect Japan's advance to Malaya and in the Dutch East Indies, where it sought access to resources such as oil and rubber. Second, it hoped to buy Japan time to consolidate its position and increase its naval strength. Third, it was meant to discourage Americans from committing into war. A Japanese attack before Pearl Harbor. This bit of history may sound familiar. Japanese warplanes staged a surprise attack in December on the U.S. Navy, but this incident occurred 4 years before Pearl Harbor. The sinking of the USS Panny is pretty much forgotten now, but it is one of the biggest news stories of 1937. In the 1930s, the United States had something that would be unthinkable today. A treaty with China allowing American gunboats, which would be the USS Panny, to travel deep up the Yangtze River. It was a major trade route for U.S. commerce in China, and it was notorious for pirate attacks. American ships patrolled the river to keep it free of bandits to protect standard oil code tankers. A little bit of history on the USS Panny. During the Battle of Nanking, the Sino-Japanese War, the U.S. gunboat Panny is attacked and sunk by Japanese warplanes in Chinese waters. The American vessel, neutral in the Chinese-Japanese conflict, was escorting U.S. evacuees and 3 standard oil barges away from Nanking, the war-torn Chinese capital on the Yangtze River. After the Panny sunk, the Japanese fighters, machine gun lifeboats, and survivors huddling on the shore of the Yangtze. 2 U.S. soldiers and a civilian passenger were killed and 11 personnel seriously wounded, setting off a major crisis in U.S.-Japanese relations. Next, a much bigger threat. By 1937, the Yangtze faced a much bigger threat than pirates. The Japanese had launched an invasion of China, and by December, the Japanese were fighting for the city of Nanking. This fight became known as the Rape of Nanking. Rescue on the way. The USS Panny, with 55 million men aboard, was sent to rescue any Americans left, including embassy staff and journalists, most notably a newsreel photographer who recorded what was to come. The Panny, with its civilians aboard, escorted the oil tankers 20 miles upstream to wait out the battle for Nanking. They anchored in the middle of the river and waited. Then, on December 12th, a quiet Sunday afternoon, Japanese planes appeared and suddenly bombed the American vessel. 4 years later, Japanese forces attacked Pearl Harbor. The Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. Just before 8 a.m. on the morning of December 7, 1941, hundreds of Japanese fighter planes attacked the American naval base at Pearl Harbor near Honolulu, Hawaii. The barrage lasted just 2 hours, but it was devastating. President Franklin Roosevelt called December 7, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The bombing killed more than 2,300 Americans and nearly 1,000 were wounded. It completely destroyed American battleship USS Arizona and capsized the USS Oklahoma. The attack sank or beached a total of 12 ships and damaged 9 others. 160 aircraft were destroyed and 150 others damaged. The attack took the country by surprise, especially the ill-prepared Pearl Harbor base. A country in the war. Most people knew what the attack meant for the U.S., even before Roosevelt's official announcement the next day. The U.S. would declare war on Japan. The U.S. was already close to joining the war, but in an attempt to preserve its stance of isolation and neutrality, it had only committed to sending more supplies on loan to the Allied forces, mainly Great Britain, France, and Russia. Within days, Japan's allies, Germany and Italy, known collectively as the Axis powers, declared war on the United States. December 7th, the date which will live in infamy, brought the United States into World War II. Hiroshima and Nagasaki, post-Pearl Harbor. The United States dropped a nuclear bomb upon Hiroshima and Nagasaki following the attack on Pearl Harbor. There were 3 reasons why. Number 1, force Japan to surrender, which would help minimize the number of American casualties during World War I. 2. World War II. Number 2, establish dominance before the Soviet Union entered the war against Japan. Number 3, wanted to be the first to use a nuclear bomb during an actual attack and observe its effect. Impact it had on Hiroshima. The impact on Hiroshima was quite devastating. For one, there were a few hills to protect it from the blast, which resulted in a high death toll. Also, a firestorm destroyed 13 square kilometers of the city. Next, 63% of the buildings were destroyed after the bombing, and 92% of the structures were destroyed or damaged by the blast and fire. The death toll added up to approximately 100,000 to 180,000 out of a population of 350,000. A lot of dead people. Impact on Nagasaki, which happened after Hiroshima. Due to the hill geography and the focus point of the bombing being away from the city center, excessive damage was limited to the Urakami Valley and part of the downtown Nagasaki. The center of the harbor and the historic district were shielded from the blast by the hills around the Urakami River. Nevertheless, the bombing was devastating. Approximately 22.7% of the buildings were consumed by the flames. The death toll was, however, less than Hiroshima. It ranged from 50,000 to 100,000. Still a lot of dead people. Yet the bomb was more powerful than the one that was dropped on Hiroshima, and so was the physical destruction. Nearly nothing was left standing. And my sources. Thanks for watching!